would it be possible that somehow from this oligopoly of initiatives, will there be soon amalgamate and there will be just like one worldwide voice web consortium? Is that conceivable? Is there any kind of idea here? Bret, what do you think?
My prediction is no, it won't happen. Because I think it just has to do with incentives. So the first thing that we have to think about is many of us remember the portal era, right, of the web. Everybody wanted to be the portal, your front door to the internet. AOL tried to do that. They lost because they tried to do too siloed. And
CompuServe as well.
Yeah, right. And then after that, though, but Yahoo and all these other companies who wanted to be open, but they also just wanted to be the front door. And I think the issue with voice assistants is, first of all, we have to think about this from a nuanced standpoint. Sometimes voice is a feature, whether it's an assistant, an agent, an interface, it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's a feature supporting something else. And sometimes it is the actual application that we're going to because it has all these special powers associated with it. So the incentives right now are for people to control the front door of the digital world. For a while, Google was viewed as that, maybe still is, certainly for a specific function it is. Certainly the iPhone has its own claim to fame there for certain contexts. We can just go down the list in terms of all the different things. Even Facebook, right, for a while, I mean, particularly with its multiple solutions, is the front door for many people to engaging through digital services. They all want that. And so the incentives are for everyone who's coming up to grab a piece of that, for everybody who's already there to maintain the status quo. And I think that ultimately those business decisions are much more important to them than the actual best interest of the user. So the best interest of the user, they say, well, it's convenient, it's safe and secure if we do it this way. We don't enter in all of these other variables that we can't control. And so, you know, ultimately, I think that the future that we're looking at is a lot of silos and some interoperability. Now, the one other thing I will say is I firmly believe there will be a independence, we'll say not big tech legacy, an independent voice assistant, which will arise and become very popular as a primary assistant for people. And the reason being is because an assistant that just serves the needs of the user is going to be very compelling because it can go out and get all of these best of breed services to solve problems. Whereas if you look at Amazon, Apple, Google, let's say, sort of the big three in this space, they all look at voice as a feature for their other business. And so there's certain things you can see around their policies, whether it be interoperability or feature sets that they don't enable. It's because they're focused on this idea of serving their other constituencies within their organization. And in that case, then it's too big of a risk for them to do things that might open it up a little bit more and maybe not service that that primary objective. So I think, you know, we're going to have this hybrid approach, and I kind of feel like that's what we're stuck with. Maybe there's a more optimistic view that Monica or other people here could convince me of, but what I'm seeing right now and what I'm projecting based on incentives is, you know, not this open, completely open network like we saw with the web, probably because of what Reghu said. The standards preceded widespread adoption versus the other way around.
We still have time.
I'd add a few things to what Bret just said, if I may, and
Please.
With support of Bret's perspective of a hybrid model. But I would suggest this: that yes, those who are controlling the front doors, they're not going to give that up. But there are all kinds of side doors that are now emerging. Side doors of enterprise assistance, side doors of enterprise voice use that are growing in terms of the complexity, growing in terms of the investment. You know, the analysts are saying here's a 20 to 30% CAGR on a small base, but a 20 to 30% CAGR of investment in enterprise voice conversational AI development. And that's opening up tens, hundreds, thousands of side doors that consumers are going to directly. Now, at some point, and to Bret's point that he made a moment ago, at some point, there's going to be a need for additional value from the general purpose platforms. And those enterprises are going to seek the customers that are in the general purpose platforms. Then you add in something like a Genie that is open source, that offers opportunity, and a hybrid model begins to emerge. So front doors, those locks are going to stay. I don't disagree with Bret at all. But there are side doors that are now emerging within the voice world. Monica?
There's so many topics here. I was thinking, Bret, you're talking about the incentives of the companies to create, to own the front doors. But there are many, many companies who don't like that. Okay? I mean, you can think about all the biggest retailers who are competing with Amazon, and you can think about all the banks that says, well, we don't really want to have a relationship be intermediated because this is all confidential information. There's healthcare, and there are a lot of players who don't like that ecosystem. And if I look at telcos, for example, all these years we have been counting on telcos for letting us communicate without somebody listening in and then serving me ads based on what I am saying on my phone. Can you imagine that, right? And there are a lot of players. There are billion dollar companies who would like to see an open and interoperable world. Where are they? I mean, why can't we get these companies to, maybe each one of them may not be building the agent for like Google and Alexa or Apple, but we want interoperability. And where are they? Why wouldn't it be possible for that to happen? Because the consumers want it.
Well, I'm not sure the consumers do know that they want it, right? So because I do a lot of consumer survey research. So sometimes you have to tell consumers what's possible before they know that they want it, and a lot of them don't do that. But I would just say that I agree with you. There's a lot of organizations that don't like the stranglehold, particularly that the big tech companies have on a lot of these spaces, but they also don't like each other. And so their incentive to collaborate across their industry is fairly low. Now, across other industries, yes. And telecom's a little bit different because it tends to be heavily regulated around the world. They still have competitors, but there's not as many. There's a lot of co-opetition that goes on. But if you look more broadly across industries, their incentives are, yes, to break the stranglehold that maybe big tech has on something, but they also are very wary of sharing any information or any mind space with their direct competitors.
Yeah, so double clicking on that incentives, Bret, I think this is, if you look at telcos, because we talked about telcos here, and you're right, I think regulated is what keeps us, let's say, sticking to some of those things which we need to, because that's how we do business. Whereas there are a lot of others who don't play by those rules, right? Which then makes this whole, like, how do you invest and compete, at that level, while from a consumer point of view, they expect similar kind of, let's say, experience, right? They don't really care if we have, let's say, 500 developers working against 10,000 developers, all working towards a similar level of customer experience, which is why I kind of like the direction where we are going with respect to, can we somehow bring a more neutral technology that kind of, is not keeping the front door, but rather allows for a lot of doors to be open. The biggest question that I have is, how are we going to make that accessible? I mean, will that get adopted? I think this is really the key question, because again, going back to that, do standards come before implementation? I think in our case, some of these ecosystems have been well established, right? I mean, there are these big ones, and how do you now, like John mentioned, have these side doors open, that it's not just some kind of thing that exists where nobody knows, but rather it gets used? I think that's the biggest question mark in my head, that maybe we need to kind of fast forward 10 years to see where we are. But at least I don't have an answer right now in terms of, if you put something like that out there, are people going to use it?
Bret, I was going to say that right now, at this very moment, we've got representatives from about 15 companies in a room open to all. trying to crack this code of interoperability, however we define that. Now, but to your point, it's not 100 companies, it's 15. And those are companies from the States and from Western Europe. But we do have people that are coming together to address this issue. But we need more momentum, we need more growth, we need more push across the enterprise world. But the issues that Monica identified, issues of data use, issues of data respect, issues of build it once and use it many, from the enterprise side, those are very real, and we know that they are. But it's, Bret, to your point, it's moving past the incentives and the hesitance to share and bringing people together on that.
So academia is one of the few places where we like to share. Okay, I don't have the incentives to keep the technology to ourselves, and everything we are doing is open source. And I think that the idea is we can work together. Okay, voice is a field where the technology is still so hard that you can actually make changes to its development, and it will make it a lot more accessible. So, for example, what we do is that everything is open source. We have tools, and you can apply it to your space. And we also put out all the open source software and data sets and so forth. So, for example, we have built a virtual assistant with about 10 top most used skills. And we are able to do that even with a small team because of the tools that we have. And once we have, for example, built a music skill, it is out there. This skill is designed in such a way that you can substitute the back end of that database with something totally different. And the same source, the same neural network can be used for different music services. And if we put all these open source neural networks out there, we can enable tons of people to make their own music services, or whatever space that we get into. If you look at the top 10, we're talking about the restaurant recommendation skills and so forth. They're all open. Okay, and if we can get more support for this kind of effort, there will be a lot more software out there that people can just adopt. And they can put their music services or their restaurant reservation and so forth on top of the technology. And I think that if it is easy to populate if you have the content, then that will make a difference. Because now, on top of that, we have also built an assistant that can interface to all these different contents. Then we have a neutral assistant that has, and we all know that content is king. And I think it's just this combination of making it easy for a lot of people to build skills, put it up on their website, put it up on their phone line and whatever. And then you say, here is also an open source virtual assistant that can give you all these services. And it is open. That means that anybody else can build on top of it and contribute to it. I think that might be an alternative.
You're making a very interesting point, Monica. I mean, this is something that we are now trying, is how can we liberate our own assistant, which kind of was in the speakers and remote controls, and kind of put that on other touch points. So what we are currently doing is, making it available on the telephone line or the telephone network for use cases like, enterprise use cases like appointment scheduling for doctors and such. So this is something that we are currently beta testing in Germany, and I'm eager to see the customer reaction to that before we kind of make it bigger. But this is, I think that's already kind of bringing it out of well-established touch points. And here I think telcos have a unique advantage that then the networks being kind of open, the more we bring in there, it's not getting tied to an particular ecosystem. But again, then it becomes a telco space. So this is a very interesting thing that we are currently exploring, and I'm really curious to see how this space will evolve, like John said, into more enterprise kind of use case as well. I mean, the good thing about voice is the amount of use cases you can voice enable is endless. I mean, just take anything, you can add a voice interface or a voice assistant or kind of this proactiveness like Bret mentioned. What matters to us as business at the end is the amount of investment that you need to do and what kind of ROI do we get on that, which, for example, could be either the number of people using it or the revenue that you can generate out of it. And this is where I believe the whole incentive is a very important discussion to have, and how can we really broaden it up beyond our own, let's say, ecosystems that we are currently looking at.
My thinking from Swisscom, if I may just wave in for a quick, so there are several things which were mentioned. I agree with Bret on the point that voice is in many cases just a feature add-on. If I may go just one small step back, and in some other cases it is a separate app and separate product. What we didn't touch today, which I think is important for interoperability, is the privacy topic. Having multiple assistants and working them together, that's great, but how do you present it in some standardized ways to the customer? For us in Swisscom is super important, like for any other telco, that the data and anything in terms of the user privacy is super transparent. So I'm just thinking, when we talk about interoperability, why we not solve the problems which we have and not just solving the problems which might come? And maybe introducing standards would actually mean just starting with some of them and then extending them to the vast majority of whatever voice topics. This is in my head. Just let's start with something. Let's motivate telcos like Deutsche Telekom, my own company, to be part of it. We were part of some open standards because not only that we believed in that, it's more, it takes more for telco to be part of some open standards just to believe in that. It has to work with what we are trying to do and has to motivate us. And then you have all our hearts and we work together to the common cause. We even contribute to that, but give us some solution. Or sometimes from academia comes the great ideas, and this is where telcos come on board for this train, which is running forward and brings value to all of us. We can't just develop the voice just for the sake of voice. It has to bring the value to our customers. It has to extend the user experience. It has to do, I don't know, whatever Amazon is using it to redirect their customers to their shops and all this stuff. Give us that opportunity and we are fully on board. At the moment, it looks really interesting, but I think the first step would, in my opinion, come from academia or OVN or something, and then we are all on board.